We're confident you'll find the assembly process straightforward as you work through each step in the assembly manual. To help you even more, we've created these helpful hint videos offering the tips and tricks we've learned along the way for handling some of the more challenging and critical steps. Before you begin the assembly process, sort your inventory. Lay each of the wood parts and hardware components on the ground, then take a few minutes to cross-reference each one with the list in the assembly manual. Remember, we're always here to help. Contact us if you find a part that is damaged or missing. Take a moment to record the carton ID stamp for each box that you receive. You'll want to write down the first 5 digits of the stamped code that come before the numbers 14459 and also the letter following those numbers. Record them on page 12 of your assembly manual. In step 2, loosely attach each post mount to the bottom of the posts with a hex bolt. It's okay to fasten the pan screws on the inside of the posts at an angle. Once the 2 pan screws are secure, go back and tighten each bolt using a ratchet. Step 3 should be done on a raised surface that is flat and stable. Place T-nuts in the back of the gable upright back. Now position it so the T-nuts are on the bottom and place the gusset support over top, centering the holes in the middle. Place the 2 gable beams on top of the gusset support so that the notched edges overlap. If the gusset holes aren't at the bottom, rotate the board so that the orientation is correct. Next, place the gable upright front over top so that it's flush. Loosely attach with 2 hex bolts. When you're sure it's square, attach with 2 wood screws. Tighten the bolts. Now flip the assembly over. Attach the gusset support to each gable beam with 10 wood screws. Insert 2 wood screws to secure the gable upright back to the gable upright front and 2 more to attach it to the gusset support and gable beam. Once all the screws have been installed, you may need to flip the assembly over again and retighten the bolts. Do step 4 on a stable, raised surface. After inserting T-nuts into the holes on the notched end of one outside beam, connect the end with another so that they fit together. Attach them with hex bolts. Get someone to help check the alignment of the boards at eye level. When the boards are straight, tighten the hex bolts. Next, insert T-nuts into the holes on the notched end of each inside end beam. Connect each inside end beam to one end of the inside center beam loosely with hex bolts. Get a helper to check the alignment at eye level and make any necessary adjustments before tightening the bolts. With some help, align the beam assemblies. If the bolts on either assembly are facing the inside, rotate the assembly so that the bolts are facing out. When the assemblies are flush, insert large bolts temporarily at each end of the beam and through the gusset holes. This will help to make it easier to line up the bolt holes. When the beams are flush on each end, secure the screws, then remove the large bolts. If you find the ends still aren't flush, loosen the bolts and adjust the alignment of the beams. Get someone to assist in holding the boards in place. Then retighten the bolts and secure with wood screws. You'll need 4 people for frame assembly, and it should be done in the final location of the structure. The positioning is crucial, and so as you work through step 5, refer often to your instruction manual and the measurements outlined on page 17. Lift a beam assembly side into place, checking to make sure the gusset holes are on the bottom edge. Insert a hex bolt into the top hole on the beam assembly, then through the post. Leave the second hole empty for now. It will be used later to secure the frame once it's properly aligned. When the end of the beam assembly side is flush to the top and side of the post assembly, tighten the hex bolt. Now lift a beam assembly front back into place. The gable upright should be pointed upwards. Once again, check to see that the gusset holes are along the bottom edge. Insert a hex bolt, this time in the bottom hole only. When the end of the beam assembly front back is flush to the top and side of the post assembly, tighten the hex bolt. When you're done assembling the frame, check each of the measurements carefully to make sure you have the positioning just right. It should measure exactly 13 feet 10.5 inches diagonally between posts. Along the front and back of the pavilion, it should measure 11 feet from the outside edge of each post. At each side, it should measure 10 feet 7 inches from the outside edge of each post. The post assemblies must be square to the beam assemblies. Spend some time checking each one and adjust the positioning at the bottom to get it right. Make sure the post assemblies and beam assemblies are level. When you've confirmed that all of the measurements are correct, use lag screws to secure each post. In step 6, you can make it a lot easier to attach the gussets by getting someone to hold them in place for you. Afterwards, recheck all of the measurements listed on page 17 in your instruction manual. Make sure the pavilion remains square and level too. Step 7 should be done on a raised surface that is flat and stable. It's crucial that you keep everything square and flush throughout this step to ensure the roof panels fit properly in future steps. Begin by laying out 5 rafters with the notched side up. Position a long strap in the notches at the bottom. If the end of the long strap doesn't fit in the groove on the outside rafter properly, rotate it so one end is flush to the outside edge of the roof frame and the shorter notch is on the 5th rafter. Put a short strap and a second long strap in position on the rafters, but don't attach them yet. Make sure the assembly is square. When the holes on the first long strap are centered over each rafter, pre-drill and secure it with 10 wood screws. You'll notice the screws on the end of the long strap go in on an angle. Use the drill holes as a guide. Next, position a rafter top short so that it's flush to the top of the first 3 rafters and one end is flush to the edge of the first rafter. Make sure the ends of each rafter are centered over the holes in the rafter top short. Attach it to the end of each rafter with 2 wood screws. Before you attach the short strap and second long strap that was already positioned on the assembly, check one more time to make sure the boards are square. You'll notice on the opposite end of each strap the screws go in on an angle. Once again, use the drill holes as a guide. When you're installing each rafter brace, it helps to use bolts as guides. When the bolt holes are lined up, secure each rafter brace with wood screws. Then remove the bolts. If a rafter brace doesn't fit, remove the screws in the rafter tops and make adjustments to the boards until they fit before refastening the wood screws. When you're done, check to make sure the frame is square. It should measure 153 inches diagonally in both directions. If it doesn't, remove one screw from each joint, adjust the frame so that it's square, then reattach the screws. Gloves are essential for step 8 because the roofing material can have sharp edges. To prevent scuffing, remove the clear and blue film from each side of the aluminum parts just before you use them. If you're using a power drill, be careful not to damage the panels by over-tightening. We recommend hand tightening the screws until they're snug. When you're positioning the 4 roof panels, make sure the end with the holes located beside the ribs is at the top of the roof panel assembly. You can identify the top because it's the side with the angled rafter top and rafter top short boards. Lay the 3 wider main panels down first, starting at this end, and make sure the ribs overlap. Then place a narrow right side panel on the open side. The top edge should be flush with the edge of the roof, with a small gap along the edge of the rafter top. Positioned correctly, the aluminum panels will overhang slightly at the bottom. They should not overhang at the sides. If the roof panels don't line up correctly, refer to Step 7 for instructions on how to make the roof frames square. Once the panels are in place, secure each with 6 roofing screws, as indicated in the manual. Be careful not to over-tighten the screws because that can cause damage to the aluminum. Attach the roof edge with roofing screws, starting in the middle and working your way towards the edge of each panel. Pre-drill into the last hole on the roof edge left before inserting the screws. Then install the rest of the roofing screws in all of the remaining pre-drilled holes to complete the panel. Insert 3 extra screws along the left edge of the roof panel. They should be centered between each of the pre-drilled holes. Apply the sticky edge of a strip of weather seal to the bottom of the rounded edge of a ridge clip short. Then position the ridge clip short so that it's flush to the end of the roof panel and doesn't overhang. Don't push down on it. Use a measuring tape and position the ridge clip short 2 3/4 inches from the bottom of the rafter top. Attach it with wood screws. Do not attempt Step 9 in windy conditions. It will require 4 people with 3 ladders to attach the roof panels to the frame. Position 2 of the ladders at the side of the pavilion where you're working and the other in the middle. Designate one person to remain in the middle throughout the step to hold the roof panels in place. Once both panels are up, check to make sure they're flush at the top. The rafters should also be flush and tight to the beam assemblies. Attach the panels at the peak using bolts and tighten them. Install the roof-to-beam brackets loosely on each panel where it connects with the rafters. Make sure the groove on the roof rafter fits snugly against the beam assembly side. The 2 panels should also be flush at the peak and top. If they aren't, press down on the panels from the outside or have someone push up from the inside to get the proper placement and make sure the notch in the roof rafter is tight. When everything is just right, screw the roof-to-beam brackets into place and tighten the bolts. Before installing the ridge cap in Step 10, make sure you remove the clear and blue film from both sides of each aluminum piece. If the ridge cap doesn't slide on smoothly, add a few drops of liquid soap on the inside of the cap before reinstalling it. If it still doesn't slide, get someone to push up on the middle of the roof assembly. If the first ridge clip short is pushed off while you're installing the ridge clip, get someone to push on it from the other end during installation. In Step 13, center each tie brace at the top of a tie. Make sure it's square before attaching it with 2 jam mounts. Attach a tie center bracket at each rafter peak inside your pavilion. You'll notice that 3 of the tie center brackets fit onto the rafters facing in one direction, and the 4th can only fit facing the other way. Use 4 pan screws to attach each tie center bracket. With some assistance, place the tie with bracket tight against the rafters so that the tie braces fit into the tie center brackets. Make sure each tie is level. Then pre-drill through the hole at the end of the tie brace before attaching each tie wrap bracket to the rafter with a pan screw.